I remember the night it happened so clearly. I had been living downtown. I was sleeping, but at exactly 3 in the morning, I was woken up by a deafeningly loud sound, almost like a horn blaring into my ears, and the most violent earthquake I've ever felt, as if the ground itself were falling apart. Just as it had come, the noise and rumbling ceased. I looked out my window and couldn't see anything. A dense fog had come in, so thick it looked as if someone had glued a bunch of pillow stuffing to the outside of my window. I could hear people talking down in the streets and went to check out what was going on, thinking a massive earthquake had just hit us. Multiple people were gathered across the street talking to each other. Their voices were riddled with confusion. Some were frantic, talking about how one of the buildings had vanished. I saw where apartment 426 used to be. There was an empty lot now, as if nothing had ever been there. In the middle of the night, across the street from me, a 7-story apartment complex had completely vanished, along with everyone in it. The police searched for months. The story was all over the news. The missing posters of the 200 tenants of apartment 426 littered the streets. Cops were everywhere, desperately searching for all those people. But life moves on. There never came any leads to this case. The police got others to investigate and people moved on. Now all that remains from that night are the memories of all those who went missing. It wouldn't be until years later that I got any real clue as to what happened. I was over at my father's house drinking with him and one of his buddies. The guy used to be a cop, and the topic of disappearances came up. I asked him if they ever found apartment 426, or any of the tenants. His face twisted into a grim expression, and he leaned forward before speaking in a hushed tone. Look, I'm really not supposed to talk about it, but it's been years, and I trust neither of you will say shit to anyone. We found the building. It was a couple of months after the whole thing went down. One of the cops was at the lot where the building used to be when his radio picked up a stray signal. He said it was hundreds of people screaming all at once, like the sounds of hell were coming through his radio. We all assumed the signal was coming from inside the building, and that it proved our theory that it somehow had sunk into the ground. So we brought in a ground-penetrating radar. Lo and behold, there it is, 200 feet beneath the surface. Funny thing is, we had already done scans when it first happened, and it hadn't been there. So why was it there now? Anyways, they drilled into it from a nearby metro station. It took them months. They weren't really hoping to find anyone alive. I mean, they knew how slim the chances were. If those people hadn't run out of food, they would have run out of air. I guess they just wanted to know what happened. The thing is, when they finally got in, it was completely empty. Not a fucking soul. This place was completely sealed. No exits. Trust me, they looked. It's as if everyone that was in the building just up and vanished without a trace. Well, that's not entirely true, because they did find one of them a couple of months later. They were excavating an old stone foundation in the old port when they hit something soft. Guy gets out and there's just blood everywhere. The excavation shovel had cracked open one of the huge boulders, and there was a guy fused in there. It gets weirder, because the guy's skin was fucking translucent. Like they could see everything inside him and shit. His blood was still warm, as if he'd just been alive. And they're obviously freaking the fuck out and call the police. And they aren't really taking it all that seriously when they get there. I mean, I can't even blame them. I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't seen it. They're just about laughing in the guy's face until they see the guy in the rock. I was friends with those guys, and they told me they'd never been that scared. The dude looked like a human-shaped sausage, you know? Like a clear casing, and you could see all his insides. Parts of him were completely fused with the rock, like there was no separation between where the skin started and where the rock ended. I kind of laughed at them at that point, because I thought they were pulling my leg, but they looked so seriously at me that I stopped. I mean, I'd never seen those guys like that. They were genuinely horrified. So they brought the body to the coroner, and he looked just as baffled. Said he'd never seen something like it in his 20 years of working there. So what killed this guy? Well, as it turns out, it was blunt force trauma from the excavation shovel. I mean, how the fuck does that even make sense? The guy was encased in stone. How the fuck was he still alive? They ran his blood and identified him as one of the missing people. We called his family to come and identify his body. By the time they got there, he just up and disappeared again. Poof, just like that, gone into thin air. We couldn't explain it. There were cameras all over the place, and they caught nothing. We never found him again, you know? We never found any of the others either. I quit after that. Couldn't really stomach it anymore. We sat in silence for a while, just thinking about what he said. I never heard the guy lie in my life, but what he just told us was completely nuts, and somehow I believed him. I mean, I was there that night. I saw that the building had vanished. I guess hearing it from his mouth with all the additional information, it all just made it too real for me. After a while, he looked up at us, plastered on a smile that didn't reflect in his eyes, and changed the subject to a completely different topic. I couldn't stop thinking about what he told us, so I left shortly after. I'm back home now, and it's foggy as hell outside. I got back at just the right time. Now I'm writing this out for you guys, because I can't get this off my mind. People have to know what happened to them. They had families, had lives. I can't just let them fade away into nothing. So I'll try to uncover more for you guys, for their families. I promise to update you guys soon. It happened again. Another building went missing in the middle of the night. 1 minute it's there, and the next it's just gone. Last night, it was my buddy's daughter who went missing, along with her entire apartment building. They'd come over that very day to shoot the shit over a couple of beers. She had asked about apartment 426, and since it happened so close to her, I told her everything I knew about it. Understandably, I think what I told her really freaked her out. I tried to change the subject, but she and her dad left not long after. That very night, while I was getting ready for bed, my old police chief called me. He knew I was close with her dad, so he figured he'd call me and let me know what happened. He asked if I wanted to be a part of the search, and I agreed. I was there when they interviewed the neighbors in the surrounding area. They all reported the same thing. A dense fog rolled in, and the ground shook violently, like the most violent earthquake they'd ever felt, followed by a deafening horn like that of a train, and then nothing. Everything went back to normal, and the world fell silent again. Except once more an entire building had gone missing in mere moments. Everyone inside is disappearing with it. So we began a search, in much the same way as when building 426 went missing. This time, it wasn't long before something was found. 2 hikers had called and reported seeing a building deep in the woods just off an established trail. So we went looking, and we found it. There it was. Its address is on full display. Apartment 451. Only around 100 kilometers away from where it had stood. It had been a 10-story building, although only the first 2 floors were currently there. I was one of the first to go in, and the second I did, I could tell something was wrong. I mean, nothing so far had given me any doubt as to what I was doing. It had all been so procedural. But the second I stepped in there, the hair on my arm stood on end. Something about the place was completely off. Something more than I was seeing. It was like every nerve in my body was telling me to get out. The first thing that hit me was the smell, like hot copper. The air was thick and heavy, almost kind of muggy, hot and humid, despite it being midwinter and snow covering every inch outside. The floor plan was all wrong. I mean, doorways leading to nothing but brick walls and hallways that just ended abruptly. Trees were growing through walls and ceiling like they just phased through everything. I opened one of the doors, and it led outside despite being a normal room door with a number. There was an elk there, standing still, completely frozen. It had this look of pure terror on his face, but it wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, like it could see something behind me, something I couldn't see. Another officer called out to me, and in the brief moment when I looked away, the elk disappeared. I don't mean just walked away. The tracks walked up to the doorframe and ended there. I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, everything here was impossible. So why was it that humid air and an elk were the only things I could think about? As if those things were what reaffirmed the inconsistencies I knew were there. Everything went to shit after I went to the second floor. I wish I hadn't gone up. I really wish I hadn't. When I went up, it had no roof, and the walls ended slightly above my head. I heard crows above me, and I looked up into the trees that had gone through the building. God, they were all up there, over 100 of them, up in the branches, writhing and moaning in pain. Every tenant of apartment 451 was up there, alive, suffering. Some look as though their skin had been peeled from their flesh. Most of them were missing limbs and pieces of their body, all ending in straight edges, as though they'd been cut off in one straight motion. I saw her up there too. What was left of her. She'd been cut cleanly in half, just above the hips, and her guts dangled down. Crows were pecking at them. I called her name. She turned her eyes to meet mine as she mouthed for me to help her. I took a step back, and my foot sank into something soft. I looked down to see a man half sunken into the floorboards. His skin was translucent. It reminded me of the other we'd found encased in stone. He screamed and they joined him, screaming in deafening unison. It got foggy out of nowhere. It just appeared, and in seconds, I couldn't see 5 feet in front of me. That's when the building began to shake violently. It nearly threw me to the ground, but I caught myself. I knew what it all meant, so I headed for the exit as fast as I could. I called out to the others to hurry and get out. As I exited behind one of my coworkers, my foot snagged on the doorframe. I fell hard, knocking the wind straight out of me, but the worst part was the blaring horn. It felt like someone was holding a train horn right next to my ear. I held my hands up to my ears, but just as soon as it started, it fell silent again. When I rolled over onto my back, the building had vanished once more, and my foot that had caught in the doorframe, well, it was just gone. It didn't bleed. It didn't hurt. My leg just ended in a straight edge right above my ankle. I looked around and noticed that only the officer who'd exited before me remained. The other 3 hadn't made it out in time. I knew them well. They'd had families. They'd been good men, and they didn't deserve to never see their children grow up, never to grow old and look back at all they accomplished. He took me to the hospital, and they couldn't explain it any more than we could. It wasn't cauterized. It was just an open wound, yet it didn't bleed. I found her post. I'm writing this in her honor. She was right. People need to know. Apartment 451 wasn't the first, and I doubt it'll be the last. I was driving out one night, deep in the sticks, through a patch of dead air. The monotony of the road and the static of my car's radio lulled me, as my eyes felt heavier and heavier. I was staring up at the stars through drooping eyes when my ears were pierced by a deafening sound emanating from the radios. A cacophony of humans screaming. So many people begging for help. I veered to the side of the road, completely caught off guard. Just as it had come, it ended, leaving me in near silence as the radio quietly hummed. I went home that night, and as I lay there, unable to sleep, I thought about what had happened. I wonder if I had picked up a stray signal from someone who needed help. The next day, I went back to the spot, guided by the screaming that projected from the radio. I had come prepared in case someone out there was injured. I had also brought a portable radio determined to follow the signal to its source. So I did. I followed it as it got louder and louder, until I reached its source, a large, craterous hole in the ground. I could hear soft cries coming from within. Horrified, I now knew someone was injured down there. I had to help them. So I tied a rope to a nearby tree and began my descent into its depths. The cave was humid and wet. Water dripped down from the ceiling. The air was filled with a metallic smell, like corroded pennies. A breeze ran through the cave, carrying it with an orchestral symphony of agony. I began to walk deeper. When I walked on something that clinked. It was a set of keys with the tag that read Apartment Building 426, followed by an address from a city that I knew did not exist. As I walked deeper in, I soon found where the screams and moans of agony were coming from. At least a dozen people were fused into the walls, ceiling, and floor of the cave. One man was completely fused into the stone wall, his face frozen in an expression of terror. I still remember the horrible sound of grinding stone on stone as his eyes shifted to meet me. There were others half fused to the stone walls, crying in pain for help. Some had limbs missing. perfectly cut off in single straight edges. There was no blood, although the stumps did not seem to be cauterized. One man was on the floor in a fetal position. Half of him was sunken in. Half his face looked up at me, and he began to speak in barely legible words. "You have to help us. Please, for the love of God, please." His pain, murmuring quickly, grew into frantic screaming. "My wife! Where's my wife? You have to help her. You have to save her." When he went quiet again, a woman's voice called out a name from the depths of the cave. When he heard it, they both erupted in agonizing wails. It was the sound of two people who had had their last hope stripped away from them, an animalistic pain sobbing that echoed on the cavern's walls. His arm shot up, clamping down on my leg painfully. "You have to get me out. I can't go back. Please, don't let me go back." I grabbed his arm, and his skin shifted under my grip like wet clay. I pulled, but he would not budge. I pulled, and I pulled. His arm socket popped wetly as it dislocated, and his arm tore off like wet paper. When his arm gave way, I fell backwards, smashing my head against a stone and passing out. I woke up and the cave was silent. I was the only one there, so I climbed out and called the police. Park rangers met me at the hole and told me the police had deferred the situation to them. The cave had been silent for the past couple of hours as I waited for them to arrive. They went down briefly, before coming back up, and in a frustrated tone, announced that there was no one down there. They suggested that I'd either made up the whole situation or had imagined the whole thing. As they escorted me out of the woods into my car, they told me to leave and never come back. They said they'd arrest me if they ever saw me again. But as I'm sitting here writing this down, I know I couldn't have made it up, because I still have the keys.